Hi, welcome to the Hunting Illinois podcast. With me today, I'm Jason Buckley. We have Dan Stevens. Our other co-host is Curtis Twellman, and we have a special guest, which is Phil Borsdorf. Correct?
Yep, got it right.
Awesome. So today we're going to kind of introduce Phil. He's the new Hunter Heritage. Is it supervisor, program lead?
Hunter Heritage Program Manager.
Okay.
Yep.
Hunter Heritage Program Manager. We're happy to have him here because that position's been kind of vacant for the past couple of years.
Yep,
So you're still
correct.
new, so we're not going to try to beat you up too much about it. But so we'll just kind of introduce you, and then we're going to talk about rut a little bit and go into rut hunting. So because that's going to be right around the corner, it's coming fast, and we're already halfway through October. I feel completely unprepared myself. So we'll kind of talk about the strategies of hunting rut, and then our past histories of hunting rut, and see if there's any cool stories of things that we may have seen during that magical time of year. So Hunter Heritage Program Manager, what is Hunter Heritage real fast?
Yep. So the Hunter Heritage Program is kind of like Illinois' version of the R3 initiative, which is a nationwide initiative to recruit, retain, and re-engage hunters across the United States. Because, you know, I'm sure you guys deal with this daily, but a lot of people know that hunters are declining, participation in hunting is declining. And so my position is focused on trying to engage the citizens of Illinois, increase interest in hunting, participation in hunting, and to do that, there's several ways to do that, but one way is to increase outreach efforts to both the hunting and non-hunting public, to sort of streamline and better communicate the hunting regulations that we all know are very complicated to understand, especially for new and novice hunters that are trying to get into the game, that are, potentially really intimidated by all the rules and regs. So, one goal is to try to, assess those rules and regulations, and wherever possible, better break them down, be more consistent across the board, transmit that information to citizens of Illinois more effectively. So that's one big overarching goal of the program. Another goal is to, kind of take a step back and look at all the rules and regs that are on the books. We have, over 200 state sites in Illinois that have hunting for licensed hunters. And, we want to take a look at those regs and try to simplify them wherever possible. Because some sites have really complicated regs that some people just throw their hands up in the air and they say it's just too hard. So being more consistent across the board wherever we can, opening up access where there are opportunities that we're missing. So taking a look at our sites, looking at missed opportunities where we can expand. I should note that the department is always looking for properties to acquire.
Mm-hmm.
That's ongoing. So we're always looking to expand access in that way. Let's see. So communication, expanding opportunity and access, and just doing better with outreach with hunters and the non-hunting public in Illinois. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of what the program's about.
No, that's awesome. Because as a program, we're University of Illinois employees, you're a DNR employee, and you're really our bridge to the DNR. And so things that we're working on and that we're trying to figure out, and the research that we're doing as a program, you're our voice really for the DNR. So we appreciate that you're here. Yeah. And we're excited that that position is filled now, and that we have someone that we can now funnel our ideas to.
Yeah, and just real quick, like a little bit of backstory about this position is some people might remember Jared Duquette. You guys worked with Jared really closely. He was the first Hunter Heritage Program Manager, and he's the one who started a lot of these initiatives with, your guys' help, with Dr. Craig Miller's guidance and the Division of Wildlife staff's guidance. And I should note that too.
Well, we should note he started our program first, and then he went over to DNR, and then he started the Hunter Heritage Program. So he was a huge it's just a force, honestly. If you ever met Jared, you know that at
Yeah.
least. So he had that framework in mind, and he started this program. Then he said we need something at DNR, and went over there and somehow made a position for himself at the DNR before he left the state, unfortunately. He went back to his home state of Michigan.
You're stuck with me now, guys. I got big shoes to fill. I fully recognize that.
Yep.
Shout out to you, Jared, for everything you started. I'm just trying to synthesize it all and get a good understanding of it and kind of pick up the torch and run with it.
Plenty of work to do. I love the idea of just increasing access on things that we already have and going through and looking at what traditionally there may have been regs put on the books back. I mean, some sites have only had hunting on them for a little bit of time, but other ones have had hunting on them for a while, and those may have never changed, and they're the same kind of regs that have been there since the 50s or even earlier or something like that. So looking at old regs and opening them up for new access and talking about that is a great start, I think.
Yeah.
Acquiring new land is great too, and then looking at what we already have and then changing those regs up to, again, just increase access.
And what I really appreciate, just a little bit about your background, Phil, is you have a lot of experience working with both private landowners as well as public landowners.
Yep.
And you're also a public land hunter. And I think that's huge for somebody in a position with the capacity you are to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes and say, hey, I understand why this is challenging for folks. I understand that, some of these site specific regulations are, at times a little cumbersome and at times prohibitive. And I think having somebody who has that background as a public land hunter in a position like this is huge.
Yep. It's a big leap to take to start hunting public land, even as a seasoned hunter. Even if you grew up hunting on your own family property or on friends and neighbors' properties, that first time you make the decision, like, I'm going to hunt public land. If you didn't grow up doing it, at least, it's intimidating, even as someone who's done it their whole lives.
Absolutely.
At least that was my experience.
No, absolutely.
I mean, that's what's helped us with our program as well, because we come from backgrounds where we're not from the state. He's from Missouri. I'm from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Curtis is from Missouri and Wisconsin.
And so we hunted around and we've seen what it was like other places. Then when you come here, we all have that same, even though we've been hunting our whole lives, we still have that new hunter mentality of at least being a new Illinois hunter. Yep. So that gave us the insight also of trying to understand how the stresses of hunting in the state is sometimes.
Yeah. Cool. Not to deviate too much, can you give a thumbs up, Jason? My Zoom did a little weird thing and pops up look at that.
What? Oh.
Can I get one?
There's an AI of if
apparently that is funky.
I thought Dan was sending emojis or something. I didn't know what that was.
It would have been awesome if it was hearts.
What if you do a thumbs down? Does it do?
All right, you did real thumbs up. Only a positive filter. Only a positive filter.
Right.
I love it when Zoom updates without telling you. That just decides to do that.
Because you weren't even doing a thumbs up. You were just kind of moving your hand around, and I guess it thought you did a thumbs up, and then all of a sudden just popped it up for you. But
Does it do it for you? Is it because it's the phone?
I have. Nope.
Nope.
Who knows?
All right. Cool.
Funky.
Who knows what we'll be able to do in the future? It's gonna get weird.
It's gonna get weird. But now let's talk about rut, huh?
Yeah, let's talk about rut.
All right, let's do it.
So welcome, Phil. So now we're gonna again talk about rut. Dan, you want to go over a little bit about what rut is, and then the tips for hunting rut generally?
Sure.
We'll go from there. Yeah.
So I think rut gets a lot of publicity in the hunting world for good reason. It's a time of year you're going to see what I describe as an increase in activity, especially daylight activity and especially at bucks. But one thing I really want to point out is there's various stages as we kind of transition through rut. We have kind of pre-rut, then we move into kind of a chasing phase. And then you start to get a little bit closer to what most people call peak rut, which I consider the lockdown. Now, for me, the peak rut isn't necessarily the time I want to be in the woods. What I really like is that lead up to rut.
Yeah.
That time when those mature bucks and young bucks too are really starting to, the testosterone levels are starting to increase in their body. They're starting to feel a little certain way, and they're going to start expanding their ranges because they have one goal in mind, and that's to find that first doe that's in heat. And you can have sits where you may see 10 or 12 bucks that you've never seen on a property before, all using the same trail because maybe that first hot doe in the county walked down that trail and now every other buck is coming. But I think there are a few myths about rut that we should probably kind of clear up right off the bat. One of the big ones is the question of what triggers rut, right? So what is that environmental change. Some people think it's lunar phases. Some people think it's weather dependent. But in reality, what it is photo period. And that's essentially the amount of daylight in a given day. But what's really cool about this whole concept of a photo period is it allows consistency from year to year to year, which is why you can pretty much guarantee the vast majority of does are going to be bred from like November 10th through November 17th, just because that photo period lines up and we start to see similar activity year after year after year. Now, I will say weather certainly does play an impact on deer activity, but it's not that triggering factor that really starts to trigger the hormone development in deer. It's really that photo period, which again is why it's so cool to be able to have this consistency for year over year. But I'll throw kind of a question out to the group and kind of let everybody give their input before we really dive into this. If you had one day to hunt to try to visually see the most rut activity you would want, what would that day pick? For me, I'll just kind of give my answer first and then we'll kind of go around. For me, it's Halloween. I have found Halloween to be this magical day where the bucks, again, that testosterone isn't peaking yet, but it's really starting to climb. They're really starting to get in that mode of trying to find does. And a lot of the deer I've harvested that I would consider, nice mature bucks have been on Halloween, particularly in midday. And that's another thing that's interesting about rut is you have this normal deer pattern, which is very crepuscular, right? So active during those twilight hours at both the beginning of the day and end of the day. But during rut, all that goes out the window. So midday can be quite special to hunt. But for me, if I had one day, it would be October 31st. And I would clearly define that as kind of the chasing phase when you're going to see a lot of deer up on their feet looking for that first doe that's, entering estrus.
I agree with you, Dan. I love to be in the stand late October. Over the years, I would agree. I've seen a lot of great daytime movement of bucks in general during that time period. So I always make a point of being in the stand during that time period. And also because once you get into that first Saturday of November, you don't have that conflict of your buddies calling you up and saying, let's go pheasant hunting. But aside from late October, I do love that first week of November. But dang, I mean, mid-November, I've seen some great bucks on their feet too. I have a hard time picking, but for sure, Halloween, and as much hunting as I could do in November.
I like that answer.
So,
yeah, I mean, I don't have the specific date. Like, I don't have a Halloween memory that I can build that idea off of, but I do. What I've learned, especially last year, was just weather dependent on for that time frame, best weather day. So last year, my dad came out, unfortunately, and it was like 70, 80 degrees first week.
It was warm.
There nothing was moving during the daytime. I mean, imagine when we said it's weather dependent on deer movement, it's because they got their winter coats on and they're running around, and the bucks are going to be wanting to move more during the cool time, which is going to be nighttime at that point. So a hot day would drive a deer to be more nocturnal, and we can't hunt at night. So anytime when it's cool, a cold front coming through where it's going to get cold, if it was warm before, cold fronts, I hunt those, or if the wind is the right direction for the spot, for the spots I want to hunt. So last year, again, it was hot the first week, so then that bumped the movement during the daytime really the second week, and we had the mentees out, and I took them, and the wind was blowing across bedding area, and both days we hunted different bedding areas, but we hunted the downwind side of the bedding areas, and both times bucks came down checking the bedding areas for does and stuff. So we saw 2 mature bucks 2 days in a row, 2 different spots. So that's what I'm looking for. I mean, I couldn't write that up any better. Now that it happened to me once, I'm like, I don't know if I can. But unfortunately, that's the bias that we always have. But so that worked out great. So that's what I'm looking for. If I'm hunting rut, cold weather, wind direction, where I'm able to go.
Absolutely.
And I got to say too, like, I love October. Yeah. I love that mild weather in October. The leaf cover you have in the trees.
Absolutely.
And especially early on, the bucks are still kind of in their summer routine. One of the biggest bucks that I never got that I had a chance at was on October 4th, the first year I started bow hunting. I'll never forget that, and I kind of got a story about that. But it was 2 years ago. I had another great mature buck standing in front of me at 25 yards. It was like October 15th.
Okay.
The middle, mid-morning.
What most people would consider the October lull.
The lull, yeah. And, it was just one of those times where I had the time to get out. And so I went, and I just couldn't believe it happened. So I do not discredit October at all. I love hunting in October too. I don't just think of it as, oh, I'm going to go get a doe. You know, I'm thinking that I might see a mature buck
Absolutely.
too, you know?
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I mean, talking about leaf cover, another thing that I got to do within the past couple years of hunting Illinois was last year was a windy day, and the leaf cover, I was just walking around, I was checking trail cameras middle of the day, and I walked up on two doe that were just sitting there feeding, and then I used leaf cover in the wind and got within range and sat within 30 yards of them for probably an hour before I got a shot on one. I actually started,
wow.
I got tired of it, and I started crawling towards them, and then me making weird noises like made their curiosity come up and walk over to me finally. And I got a doe, but you can spot and stalk, and with the leaf cover, if on a windy day, if you're downwind walking around, you might walk up on something.
Yep.
And that's awesome as well. How about Curtis? Curtis, you got any particular time during the rut that you like to aim for?
Well, same that you guys said. I mean, basically hunt when you can. When you have time, get in the woods, because you're definitely going to have more fun out there than sitting on your couch, that's for sure. But if I could pick any time of year, like Jason said, any time between, I feel like it starts right around Halloween and then goes until basically the firearm season. Any day in there is probably going to be my favorite day, as long as the weather's cooperative. Because like Jason was saying, even though we know it's the photo period that drives rut, still in archery hunting things can go wrong. Luckily, I've never had a bad shot that required a multi-day track, but for me personally, I want to make sure that when I'm hunting, I think a deer could handle being left out all night. And if I come and get it, hopefully 90% or more of that deer is usable. So I definitely want it to get cool. I want the nights to be hopefully below 40, or at least right there around 40. And that just gives me that much more drive to go, because I know I have a little bit more leeway. Makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside, if nothing else.
That's a great point on the ethics of, the weather you're hunting in, and understanding what happens if you shoot a deer. Are you going to be able to get that meat cold fast enough? And what happens if you make a bad shot and it turns into an all day long or 2-day ordeal,
Right.
So great point there. Like,
Do you want to know
gotta factor that in.
what was the best public service announcement for shooting your game and letting it rot by accident? Was the Into the Wild movie where he shoots the moose and then it goes bad.
Oh,
I hear
sure.
people reference that all the time. They're like, I don't want I don't want my meat to go bad. Like, how temperature kind of shoot my deer at, because I don't want it to go bad. Like there's so many times that hunting's shown in media, and it's weird that one scene sticks with people. So anyway, yeah.
One other thing real quick is, if the mosquitoes are bad, I'm not going.
Yeah, look at that with turkey hunting.
In October, if they're really bad, you're either really selective on where you're hunting,
Absolutely right.
how high the wind is, or if you're even going at all, especially if the temperature's getting up there.
Yeah. Which that's why, honestly, I haven't hit the tree yet this year. It's just the temperatures haven't been great. But one thing I would like to point out too is there's a lot of data at your fingertips that can really help you kind of anticipate when you're, especially on public land, when you're going to start to really see an increase in activity. And one of the big things is crop progress reports. When you start to see a lot of the crops around public land start to get harvested, there's almost a mass migration back to the woods, right? Because deer in reality can live, almost their entire life in a cornfield. There's plenty of water, whether it's standing water, whether it's drainage ditches from, the field being tiled. There's a lot of moisture naturally in corn already, plenty of food and cover in there. And so I really wait until about right now, mid-October is when I really start thinking about hunting, and A, because of the temperature, and B, just because I really like to monitor these crop progress reports and see. And luckily, the USDA just put out a report on October 8th that showed that we are well ahead of last year's progress at this stage, as well as even above the 5-year average. So we're in a good spot this year, that the vast majority of agriculture crops are going to be out of the ground before rut even really gets going. So the timing this year should be quite well,
Stage
especially
is set.
Yeah, and the
We'll find
weather's
the acorns.
conducive already. We're already getting cool temperatures in the evenings and throughout the day. So it's shaping up to be a good season.
Yeah. Shouldn't be a factor during the firearm season.
Right. Right.
Won't have that issue to cite.
Yep.
So.
But I want to talk a little bit about strategies. You kind of mentioned, Jason, telling your story about your kind of overall favorite strategy for, a pre-rut or even rut hunt. And for me, it's very similar. It's finding doe bedding and getting on the downwind side of it. And what's really interesting about this time of year is I feel like you can get away with a lot more in the woods than typically, maybe, especially like if we're talking the October lull. Right now, deer are on alert, especially on public land. They're starting to see pressure is starting to, they're noticing it, right? They're noticing hunters in the woods. They're starting to shift they may not be completely nocturnal, but instead of getting out of their bed at 4, maybe they're getting out of their bed at 5. And so you may not, get that pre-evening movement. But what I have found to be really useful during this time of year, you're getting a lot more daylight movement, but you can get away with a lot more. And just to kind of highlight a story that kind of illustrates this point, I was sitting, it was about 3 or 4 years ago, I was sitting on a downwind side of a doe bedding area. This was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm sitting up there eating my snack, not really expecting anything. And then all of a sudden I hear what sounds like 2 kids playing tackle football in the woods. I'm like, okay, here we go. Something's chasing already. And this was on Halloween. This was October 31st, and I'm sitting in my stand. All of a sudden, a doe comes. I mean, she had to be running full speed by me. That instantly tells me, okay, there's something following. I grab my bow, stand up. Here he comes, a nice, probably 130-inch 10-pointer. Not huge, but for me, I'm completely happy with it like that. That's my jam. He comes into about 15 yards, and this is where I made the mistake. I draw. I didn't check to make sure my arrow nock was knocked completely in the string. I was in a ladder basket stand. That arrow falls out of the bow, hits every rung on the way down to the ground, and that buck is still standing at 12 or 15 yards staring at that doe. Has no care in the world. I have time to grab another arrow off my quiver, knock it, draw, and arrow him because he was so focused on that doe. And those are the rut stories that just get me fired up.
And if you just would have had a video of that, you'd be famous, because that would be a super popular video.
Yep.
I just see arrow falls all the way down, and then the deer's still standing there, and you get another shot. That's great.
It doesn't happen like that often, but I was quite proud of that moment.
You would have made it look
That's the kind of hunting imagery I want to see. Right there. That's it.
My dad lost an arrow last year while on stand. He had one fall off his bow while he had a buck in range too. He didn't get that buck. It happened to him. So always check that.
Absolutely.
Make sure that arrow's knocked.
Absolutely. Now, do you guys do a lot of calling throughout rut?
I've started to,
Sure.
Or I have been for a few years, and I find that if I do blind calling, I call in a lot of young bucks.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I haven't had as much, like on the videos, they grunt at the mature buck and he turns and he comes in. I've had a lot of mature bucks just ignore me. Most of them ignore me.
I've tried. I've only had a couple opportunities where I've seen one off in the distance that wasn't coming towards me already, and I call at them, and I don't know. They just never come to me. I don't know. I just stink at it. I don't know.
And one of the big challenges, and I'll let Curtis kind of expand on this, because this is kind of something he's really near and dear with, is near and dear. You like that pun?
Nailed it.
But, in terms of competition for resources, deer, especially in Illinois, a buck doesn't really have to compete that hard with other bucks to find a doe. We have so many does in this state that breeding competition isn't really a big motivating factor. And once I put 2 and 2 together in my head and kind of realized that, I started to limit my calling a lot. Like you mentioned, talking about blind calling, I don't really do that at all. I do calling at a very targeted animal, because I want to be able to watch his body language, but 2, I feel like when you call out to the void, deer naturally know what direction the wind is going. They want to get downwind of a sound before they go check it out. And so I feel like 90% of the time I do blind calling, I have something sneak up behind me. I don't even notice it, and then all of a sudden I hear it blow and take off. Right? So
and that's a great point. Like, I don't like doing blind calling unless my stand location is pretty ironclad. I've got a hard, bluff, stream, whatever, right behind me, downwind or something, and I don't do a lot of it, but because like I said, over the years, it's just been a lot of young bucks, and it's kind of like, I don't know. Sure. Nothing against shooting young bucks or anything.
Oh, absolutely.
It's always fun to watch that action,
Yes.
But
yeah, no, for sure. Curtis, you ever call that much or anything?
Not a lot. Like Dan kind of mentioned, for me, I call it kind of a Hail Mary strategy. It's more to entertain myself than anything else, because most of the time I'm hunting in an area that has a really high doe to buck ratio, like Dan was alluding to. And I think calling is, the effectiveness of calling is directly proportional to the doe to buck ratio. If you have more bucks than does, calling is going to be awesome. You're going to get some amazing action because those bucks are competitive, that they have to be, but across most of Illinois, at least if you don't intensively manage your population by taking does, you're probably sitting at over 50% does and, way under 50% mature bucks. So the competition is very light. And I just think under circumstances like that, calling, it doesn't work. I would say it doesn't work way more often than it works. There still are random times where it does work, but it's not like if you have a good, healthy. Now, I have been in like Texas and areas where it has been managed where there have been more bucks than does. And then absolutely, it's more like elk hunting or turkey hunting at that point where calling becomes a integral part. But as many does as we have out there, competition's a little light, so I don't put a whole lot of stock in calling myself, but it is fun.
Yeah. Sometimes I find myself wanting to do it when I'm bored.
Yes.
I'm like, I'm kind of getting bored. I don't know. I'm just going to do this.
Throw a few grunts out, see what happens. Yeah.
You said calling, but I know you're lumping rattling in, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever rattle?
So I used to rattle quite a bit. One of the properties I grew up hunting in northern Missouri was adjacent to a big famous piece of ground that one of the big outfitters who has a TV show, I won't say his name, but he managed that property extensively. We benefited from that just being adjacent to it. And there are certain dates, I couldn't tell you what really like triggered it, but you could literally take two sticks together, bang them together, and you would have bucks coming in. Because again, like Curtis said, it's managing that buck to doe ratio. So I do a little bit of rattling. I think again, it's more to entertain myself.
Right.
And like you said, that's when I see the young bucks. It's almost like clockwork. If you pay attention, you'll have a spike. He may be 200 yards off because he doesn't want to come into the main show, but he'll stay back there and just sit there and watch it. Exactly. But yeah, I don't do a ton of rattling, but when it works, boy, is it fun, man.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen a buck fight?
Yes.
Have you?
Yep.
I don't think I've ever seen one.
Spars. I'd say spars, not like a true fight where they want to actually kill each other, but where the younger bucks come up and they butt their heads a few times. I've seen that. I've never seen them all out like angry going at each other though.
One of the funniest stories, not really a buck fight, but kind of along the same veins. I was hunting private land in northern Missouri using a decoy.
Oh, cool.
Note to self, if you use a decoy, take it home with you that evening. Don't leave it out in the field.
It's destroyed.
It was a massacre. There had to be a buck who at like midnight just came through and just destroyed that. There's pieces and legs flying all over the entire field.
Wow.
Yeah, should have had a trail camera on that.
I know. I learned that was an expensive decoy too. I've never bought one since.
I saw the last fight that I can remember. I saw, I don't know if I saw anything besides this one, but it was in Illinois, and that like as far as you can see when you're up in a tree stand, there's always like that as far as you can see before the woods just become too much woods. I saw movement, and then all of a sudden I see two bucks fighting each other over there.
Neat.
And then they go back and forth, in and out of view, and then all of a sudden one takes off running down the hill and ran away, and then the other one ran and took a doe right in front of me, and then chased the doe across right in front of me, and I was like, meh, 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 and then I was just trying to stop.
You can't stop them.
They were running, and I was like, oh,
I better shoot.
Yeah, I know. And then at the same time, you're like, so it's like also cool, but I'm like, ugh. But so that was the fight I saw. It was like in and out of view, and then I saw the one take off, and then the winner's trail after the doe. It was so cool. Yeah, it's just you don't see that unless you're out in the woods during that time of year.
You don't.
For sure.
Yeah. There are things.
Just since you mentioned like how it happens on TV, right, where you see people call and the buck comes right in. I do have a personal story. This is actually the reason why I kind of swore off buck hunting for a long time, because this was in my high school years, right, and big time hunter. I got in with people who hunted on TV. Actually, the Primetime Buck series, and I got to be a part of that whole thing and got to see the whole thing. And what they portrayed was not the story that happened at all. I knew how the hunt happened. I knew how the whole thing went. And the way they chopped it up and portrayed it, they made it look like he rattled in the deer. I mean, if you watched it, it looked seamless. None of that ever happened. And it was such a facade. The whole thing made me feel just dirty. And I was just, after that, like hunting big buck deer almost became a joke to me. And I wanted to go out and just shoot does. There's times I even passed up bucks, nothing big, but small bucks, and just shot does because of that experience. And it's just now that I'm like starting to get over that icky feeling of what I call like the dark side of deer hunting. But and there was more in that story too that included baiting and all kinds of things that were not aligned with my ethics. But I swore off hunting shows from that point until basically I found The Wild Within, Stephen Ranella's show that was on before Meat Eater, and it was focused on what I thought was the right things. And that's what kind of brought me back to hunting shows. But yeah, that experience, it kind of threw me off because it showed me that all that stuff you see, none of it actually happens, or at least most of it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. That would jade me too.
Yeah. And that's why it's important. I mean, whenever we mentor anyone, we got to make sure we're doing it the right way, because you can give someone a bad taste in their mouth real quick if you're showing them the wrong stuff. Going back to calling and things, but I just watched the Hunting Public podcast. They just talked about calling. They have a whole hour episode on their podcast this past week or so, and they're talking about how going into a new area is a good time to call if you don't know anything about the area. It's like a spot and stalk, but you stop and you call, and then you try to be like a deer. And, and you try to, and it was the first time I really thought about like really kind of imagining that buck and like what it's doing, and trying to like be the voice of the buck that you're imagining in your head. Like that really helped me out. Like think about, because like if you're calling all the time, like when did you ever see a buck stand in one spot and call that much?
Right. The realism aspect of it all.
So,
and I've seen their material. I mean, they get crazy with it. It's cool. You know, they're beating the ground and thrashing vegetation. And
So they were talking about how you could either call or do a rut or rattle sequence, and just move around through an area. If you're heading towards the spot you're trying to get to, and you just have no faith in anything, so you're just trying to see if you can pull something out between there and there. Or if you're going past like a bedding area or something like that on your way there, you can call and see if anything comes out and like wait a half hour or so. And they made a good point of like mature bucks. And I've seen video, I forget which one of their videos. They had one where a guy had a buck just out of range and it bedded down right in front of him, and they had a time clock in the bottom corner. It like ticked off like how like its movement, and like had the time lapse of the video. The bucks stand still for 15-20 minutes at a time. Like they're in their house, they don't need to go anywhere, so they can just stand there and they're listening around and seeing if anything's moving around or anything. And that also is how you should be moving through the woods. And it's just so hard to not walk like a human. I struggle with this so much, where I don't want to call like a human. I don't want to walk like a human. I got to be more deery, and I'm working on that.
A mature buck in reality can take, an hour to walk 20 yards. And that's no joke. I remember actually the first buck I ever harvested, it was during the Missouri youth season. My dad was sitting next to me, and he had a good view of this buck. Right as sun rose, he was just kind of sneaking through the river bottom, and he goes, "Big buck coming." And it was about 30 minutes before I could ever see it, even though I'm literally sitting right next to him, just because there was something blocking and he was just moving that slow. But it was literally take a step, 2 minutes, take a step, wait 2 minutes, take a step. They move that deliberate and that slow. And then finally a doe came in and he started chasing her. And what I really want to highlight about this story is how deer vocalize when he's chasing, especially mature buck. It's literally like every time his foot hits the ground, he's doing just a soft little style grunt.
I've
and
seen videos of that.
For so many hunters, they just do the very standard that kind of three cadence grunt. If you're going to do it, try to sound like what deer sound like. And I'm sure they do make that vocalization to some extent, but all the grunting I've heard while I've been in a tree is always that just short little every time that buck takes a step as he's chasing a doe.
Yeah, I don't think I can ever think of a time where I've heard like a buck roar
Yeah,
you know,
right,
or anything like that.
It would probably scare me, honestly. Sasquatch out here? What?
Yep. If you ever do, it's probably another hunter calling.
Yeah. But what's really cool about rut too is just the smell of bucks. You can actually start to smell bucks where they've been, where they're coming, especially as you start to develop your nose for it. I like to think that a lot of those like skunk ape and yeti sightings where people just get that smell, I think it's just deer rutting.
Yeah.
Because they have a very unique and strong odor.
Yeah. My dad said he could smell them.
Yeah.
I can't smell in general. But
Sure.
I
forgot about that.
I'm disabled. I don't have a sense of smell. Fun fact about Jason. But but no, my dad always was like, I smell them. I'm like, yes.
No, you really can.
Yeah. That's awesome. So yeah, man. Anything else you guys want to talk about, Rut?
I guess we could talk a little bit about lures in different scents. For me, I use them very sparingly. I don't use a ton of lures. I don't personally use a ton of cover scent. That's something we kind of harp at on a lot of our workshops and material is, in reality, if you play the wind direction right, you really don't have to use a lot of these different products that are out there on the market. There's people buying these like $500 generators that create an ozone bubble around you. And again, if you just play the wind right, you're not going to have any issues. So for me personally, I don't use a ton of cover scent. Obviously, I try to keep my clothes relatively scent free. I have dogs at home, so everything stays in the garage in plastic tubs. I do have a few cedar branches in there just to give some additional cover scent.
Confidence.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. But I don't do a ton of scent control. But I do use lures occasionally. And what I have found to be a very productive strategy, especially on public land, is doing little drags out of a deer scrape. Use some doe estrus, put a few drops in that deer scrape, put some on a cotton swab or something tied to a string, and drag that to your stand. I killed a buck on opening day of firearm season. You actually came out and helped me drag it out. What time was that? At probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon again.
And it was hot too.
And it was hot. I was in a t-shirt.
Yeah, we were in t-shirts. Yeah. It's one of the videos that we've shot.
Oh, one of the clips. Yeah. But I did a little deer drag coming out of a scrape, and 1 o'clock, here comes him, nose to the ground, followed every single step I took right to my location and made a shot at like 15 yards with a shotgun, and that was that.
Cool.
So you guys use them much, or?
I try to. I've had some luck with it, but not like a big buck yet. I've seen little bucks follow them in recently.
That's.
But so I'm not cool it worked, but I know my dad taught me how to hunt. I always say my dad.
Sure.
My dad definitely did it before, and he swears by it. He does it every time he goes out during that time of year. That's his main way of hunting. Even if it's not even on a scrape, even if it's just on a trail that he came in on, if he wants to try to get him to hit it and come across a trail, even if it's not a scrape or already, it's just a deer trail that he's working on.
Sure.
And he wants to pull him from the deer trail. He'll do that from there.
Logically, it makes sense as a strategy, because especially if you kind of understand the behavior of why a deer is making a scrape, especially a buck, he's making that scrape as a communication tool. He wants to communicate to does that, hey, I'm in the area, I'm ready to breed. And he's waiting for a doe to come back, urinate in that scrape, and say, okay, I'm ready to breed now too. And then he's going to start the chase. And so you're kind of just basically mimicking that natural process with your lures.
Yep.
I didn't have any luck with it growing up.
Sure.
So I gave up on it, but it's cool to hear you guys have had some luck with it.
Yeah. It's very sparing, I should say. It's not like every time I go out, I really only use it like Halloween. I'm going to use it for a couple days. See if it works. If it does, it doesn't. But in my view, it's not going to hurt anything.
Real quick, what kind of stuff are you guys buying? Just off the shelf?
Yeah, just off the shelf.
Yeah. You're not going to the specialist,
I'm not, no. I found
in town or whatever.
The cheap stuff works fine. I think one of the big things, and I'm kind of glad you brought that up, is to pay attention to the expiration date on these things, especially the urines. They very quickly turn into ammonia, and that's what deer can smell. They can very quickly tell when it makes that transition from urine to ammonia, and they essentially, what I have seen from some of the research is at that point they will avoid it because it doesn't smell accurate. Again, don't know the truth behind it, but it makes logical sense.
I
researched it.
The pricing on some of this stuff is insane. Like some of it's like $50 a bottle.
Because a lot of it's like bottled out of live animals. So that's where
I
you're
usually
spending
go
the money.
mid-tier, low-tier if I'm trying.
Code Blue, Tank 69.
Tank 69.
What are you guys into?
Whatever's on sale. Literally.
Yep. And then
I wouldn't look past good quality synthetics either. There's good quality synthetics out there that don't go bad, like Dan's talking about. And being a trapper, I am very particular where I get scents because I know full well that there's people that put out trapping baits and lures that are straight up junk. And I know the same thing is there with deer. So if you want brown food coloring, then just buy whatever. But I'm going to research the company a little bit. Then that comes from my trapping because I've definitely bought trapping bait and lure that was nothing. And just anybody can slap a label on a bottle and charge $6.99, and people will buy it. Because what are you going to taste it and say that it's not right? Probably not.
Well, I can't
with it.
I can't smell it, so tasting it's really the only way I know it works. No.
That's your gauge.
Yeah, that's it. I'm like a snake.
Yeah.
One of the worst scent cover, speaking of things that don't work, was early 2000s. My uncle had his orange and he sprayed it it was like a carbon spray, and it turned his orange black. As soon as he sprayed it one time, went black, and it never came out.
Wow.
So he had a black spray on his clothes for the rest of the time, and for the rest of his life, because he's not going to switch out his orange. So
that's a bummer.
Yeah, so he had his black spot on his orange the whole time.
I still spray my clothes down with scent killer.
Sure. Yeah.
Again, if with the thought how much does this really do?
Yeah,
I'm stuck in that mindset that I'm going to do it
anyway. With old dirt spray, but I've stopped. I've just hunted to the wind now, man. Ever since working here,
the main
we
thing.
talk about more and more. I've evolved as a hunter since working here. I was a tree stand hunter from Pennsylvania. Always sat in the same spots, and now I'm trying new stuff and learning myself. And I just hunt the wind, and I like I said, I walked up on those doe with no scent cover on. I have dogs and everything else, and just walked right up on them. It was insane.
Yep.
Right? So
I would like to kind of circle back just to close out that lure talk.
Yeah.
One thing I see a lot, especially on public land, is people leaving their scent out, whether it's the little plastic cases that have like the cotton swab inside that you kind of hang on a tree, whether it's tampons or different cotton. You see it, or even the new buck bomb. They're like a WD-40 style. They are everywhere. And if you use them, take it out with you.
Take that stuff out of the woods.
I went to a new spot in the dark, climbed a tree. I'm sitting there as the light came up. I looked down, there's a damn buck bomb can right at the bottom of my tree. I'm like, son of a gun, man.
Yeah, that is frustrating.
I guess I picked a good spot, but dang.
or a ruined spot.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
know,
Yeah, great minds, but still, you might have been out there. Who knows how old that can is, too.
True.
They're sitting out there forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's almost like going out there and seeing like Christmas tree ornaments all over the
Some days it feels
trails.
like that. Yeah. Yeah. So just take that stuff with you. It's lightweight. And if you're worried about the smell, I keep a bunch of extra Ziploc bags in my pack at all times for whatever reason. Throw them in there and you're good to go.
Yep.
Yeah. Any other strategies that you can think of? So hunting the wind, doing lures.
There's always kind of the basic strategy of find where the does are, right? And that's kind of all we're trying to do during rut. Obviously, you can try to get in a buck's backyard and try to find where he's bedding and try to sneak on him that way. But I have found the easiest is hunt the does. And then, hey, like we've all talked about, we like to hunt for meat anyhow.
Yeah.
Antlers are a nice bonus. They look cool on the wall, look cool on the bookshelf, but you can't eat them, right? And so even hunting does, there's times where even Halloween, I'm like, I just really want to put some meat in the freezer. I'll shoot a doe. Oh, yeah. I'm not. There's a lot of people who are, when rut starts, they completely forget about any deer that doesn't have antlers.
Dude, I know I've talked about this with you guys before, but we're going to be having some deer processing videos come out, and I haven't had deer steaks probably since February. And I was over at Chuck's River Bend, and I was filming him cutting up some deer, and I felt like I was a vampire. I was like, man, those chops look real good.
Sorry, I didn't bring any today.
I know, man. I know. I'm ready to get some does for sure.
Didn't know you were struggling that bad.
I go through it pretty quick. I still got a hamburger. I got to finish that.
There you go.
But yeah, it's not the same.
I'm absolutely a meat hunter too.
Yeah.
Grew up on the stuff.
Yep.
And we just finished our last pound of burger the other night. So that's one of the reasons why I was out this last weekend.
Sure. Yeah, trying to put some.
And yeah, I was in that saddle like I told you, first time in a saddle.
Oh yeah, how'd that go for you?
Didn't like it.
No?
I my first investment after getting a real job after school was a lightweight mobile tree stand.
Yep.
I bought it up there in Bartonville at the sporting goods store, and that was like my first big, real money purchase. And that
I'm a hunter now.
Awesome. Best investment I ever made, other than my kayak. As far as accessing public lands, but I think I've just really grown accustomed to using that thing. I feel like it's maybe a little more efficient. Granted, I'm kind of biased against the saddle. I had a fork buck come in on my saddle weak side.
Okay.
And I made the mistake of, finding some deer trails in a geographic feature where I anticipated deer trails to be. Then I backtracked downwind to get closer to a trail intersection.
Oh,
well,
sure.
and that fork came in on that main vein, caught my scent, and he was kind of sniffing around.
Ground scent or
ground scent?
Okay, yeah.
Where I had walked, and I think I was trying to stay off the trails, but I think he just, I was in that saddle. You're leaning back away from the tree. I was anticipating him coming on my weak side. I was able to get the bow over the tether and the bridge, and I was in a super awkward position and just sticking out from the tree the way I was. I wasn't super high. He just picked me off and blew out of there. And it just confirmed all my biases that I didn't like the saddle and I was mad about it. Yeah. And even though it was so much more efficient to carry in, I think I'm going to go back to the lightweight. So
the next hunt you're going to be using your hang on.
I think so. So are you guys looking to buy a saddle setup? Or?
Absolutely not. I'm a hang on guy myself too. Yeah. I just invested in what I would consider a very nice hang on set. Luckily last year here in Champaign, our Field and Stream, well, not luckily, but they closed. Yeah. And so all of their hunting equipment was literally like 70% off. So I got, the deal of a lifetime on a nice stand, ultra lightweight sticks, and I'm quite pleased with it already.
Cool.
I was able to get in it a little bit, just kind of preseason scouting, picking some spots, and it's very comfortable, very lightweight. So,
what'd you do before that?
I had a summit climber.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I've kind of the climbers. You need such a specific style of tree to make that thing work.
Yeah.
I found it limiting. Too. Yeah, I just found it limiting so often. I'd find a spot that I was like, I'm going to kill a deer here. It's going to happen. This is the kind of spot I like to sit in. And I just couldn't find a tree. And at some of these spots, I was able to ground hunt and had plenty of success on the ground with a bow. But there's a couple areas that I really want to focus on this year where we've got some really nice mature bucks using consistently. And you need to be in a tree there. There's a lot of understory. So the hang on is definitely going to be my preferred this year.
Yeah.
I've always had my summit since I was 14. It's the same summit I've had. So
climbing guy.
Stand. Yep.
Man, I had a similar experience where I just kept finding that I couldn't hunt where I wanted to hunt. Yeah. So kudos to you for making it work.
I know. No, yeah, it's definitely limiting. I come from Pennsylvania has more older trees, so it was a lot easier to use in Pennsylvania, I feel like, than around here. There's a lot more trees to pick from anyway. So around here, there's not many trees that are that big along the fields at all because they're probably newly planted trees or whatever. But then I've been hunting ground too. So I got my turkey chair, which I've now become just my regular hunting chair at this point. It's just one of those low ground chairs.
Yeah.
And
turkey lounger type deal. Yep. So comfortable.
Yeah. So comfortable. I'm not all about comfy. I'm about sitting in the woods for a very long time and be comfortable. I want my tree stand to be a recliner, and I want my turkey chair to be just as comfy as possible. So so I can spend all day in that thing, advisable or not, I can.
Yeah.
But that's what I work with.
After that saddle hunt where that deer blew out of there, I thought, all right, I've hiked all the way back in here. I could stay here, which is probably the smart thing to do. But I was so frustrated with the setup that I got down and I decided to hunt from the ground. And
that's pretty telling.
Yeah, and I just I was like, I just got so uncomfortable after a little bit. If you turkey hunt, most guys hunt with a turkey vest. You get used to that padded seat or whatever, and I'm just sitting on the ground, and after an hour or whatever, I was like, I don't know how all these guys just sit on the ground, crouching on their knees, and just like, man, they're tougher than I am. That's all I could think. And what about you, Curtis? You hunt from the ground at all? I didn't know these guys hunted from the ground.
Yeah, I've hunted from the ground a lot the past couple years. I do have a double bull blind, so every once in a while I'll use that. But last year was a lot of just hunting straight from the ground without the blind because, that's kind of a hefty thing to have to pull in. And then it doesn't go everywhere either. You need a certain spot. I really like to tuck them into low. If you can find where the understory is right at the top of the blind, it's just perfect. Tuck it back in there in the shadows and real easy to hide. But it's not something that if you were just going out to a grass field, you'd be better off without the blind than with it at that point most of the time because Deer, like we mentioned, they have a very particular set of skills like Liam Neeson, and those skills are to elude hunters. And if you pop up a giant dark ground blind, even if it is fully camo in the middle of what is essentially their living room or their dining room, they're going to stay away from that thing for a while. If you leave it out there 2 weeks, eventually, sure, they'll walk right by it, because we've all seen them do that with wooden blinds and things like that are out there all the time. But it takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to look at that thing real hard for at least a couple weeks. So yeah, a lot from the ground, and yeah, it can be uncomfortable, but you find a way to make yourself. If you've got confidence to sit there, then it helps, because the confidence, thinking that at any time something good can happen, you can deal with some discomfort. And you got to switch your sitting, because I shoot a vertical bow, so like a turkey lounge chair doesn't work for me. I can't lounge like that. So yeah, I do have to be in a more athletic stance. So a lot of times I am on my knees, or especially what I really like to find is a down log where I can sit my butt up a little bit higher and still have my feet where I can get under myself if I need to. Or another place that I found really good for that was hillsides. Actually, same hillside I wound up shooting a turkey from is perfect. When I find a hillside like that above a trail, I had a couple great sits in places like that last year, and they're super comfortable because you almost feel like you're on a stand. You can dig a little with your heels into the bank, so you've got a platform, and then you make a little nest where you can sit and you're comfy, and you're almost in a little lazy boy there on the side of a hillside too. So there are ways to get more comfortable, but yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it's not the Ritz-Carlton out there.
One thing I have found that I use quite a bit these days, especially if I'm just sitting on the ground. I purchased, it's an inflatable backpacking, I don't know if it's a butt cushion or a pillow, but that thing folds down to, the size of a hockey puck. I can put it in any pocket. I get there, it takes 3 or 4 breaths to fill up. I've found that to be quite comfortable. Just put that under and sit, and you're off the ground. You have a little insulation, because that's what really sucks about the ground. If it's super cold, that ground just sucks any body heat straight out of you.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm taking notes right now.
There you go.
Ground hunting strategies, and I want to throw out there too that been hunting my whole life, but your guys' content and the information you guys put out is informative even to myself, that I considered a semi-seasoned hunter, that's been doing it pretty much my whole life.
Sure.
I'm impressed by the information you guys put out there. So I'm always taking notes.
Nice.
I'm always learning from you guys. And, another thing to throw out there is, you guys out there watching, you need to discredit everything I've said, because I've never killed a mature buck in my life.
We're going to change that this year. Yeah. We've got the spot for you, Phil.
Yep, I'm stuck at 2.5 years old.
Hey,
I cannot break that. Yep. And I want to shoot a big buck like everybody else.
Sure.
But I'm eating deer every year, so I'm taking a doe, I'm taking a young buck, whatever.
Yeah.
Last year I had really, really limited time to hunt.
Yep.
And my whole strategy was I'm shooting the first thing I see.
Yep.
And it happened to be a small buck.
I shot a spike last year.
Yep.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
I shot a spike 3 years ago. Yep.
My wife, we actually killed a bunch of spikes last year. My wife killed one. Dr. Miller killed one. Yeah, there were spikes just going down everywhere. They eat the same.
Awesome. 11 points.
Yeah. I like that.
That's a cliche joke.
I like that.
Well, I think we're good on time. So if you guys have anything else you want to add.
Yeah, I do want to give kind of one quick plug. Obviously, this is really focused on rut, this kind of podcast episode, but I do want to emphasize the spring turkey lottery application is open right now. It opened on October 3rd or something, but it essentially runs through December 1st. So you still have a few months. But make sure to get that application in now, just so you don't forget.
Yep.
If you're wanting to submit your application, just go to the website exploremoreil.com, and you can do it directly there through your account, and hopefully you draw a tag.
Yeah.
And that reminds me, now we have a guest. I can do this. Phil, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
I want to plug these guys.
Hey.
Like I said, seasoned hunter, always digesting the material. So for you new hunters and novice hunters, watch these guys' stuff. Take in the podcast, watch the how-to videos. If you can get in on a workshop, do that. Real quick, guys, how do folks get in on a workshop if they want to do that?
Yeah, so the best way is to just go to our program website at learntohuntil.com. Luckily, the program has grown to a point where if you just search Illinois Learn to Hunt through any social media, through any internet search, it'll pull up our website directly. So you'll be able to see our full event schedule. We have a couple webinars coming up. We're going to schedule a bunch more. Especially, we're going to do another deep dive into rut, kind of a follow up to this podcast where we're going to really dive into the science of it, and kind of look at some activity models and really some interesting stuff. But yeah, that's kind of the best ways through our program website, through our YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram. We pretty much cover the whole shebang.
Cool.
We even had a webinar last night that Curtis did. He held and he put together, and it was on essentially how do we use. So trail cameras give us a wealth of data, right? Whether it's the timing of the picture, the weather, the directionality of the travel, the individual deer itself. And so he did a really cool webinar last night that'll be up on our YouTube channel here shortly. That just goes over how to use some of that data in your hunt planning processes. And so cool stuff like that even if you're, like you said, a more seasoned hunter, there's content there for you that you're going to learn something, you're going to take something away that you can immediately implement into your hunting strategies and your toolbox.
You guys are professionals.
Yeah, trying to. I think you give us a little too much credit.
Make it.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, come back.
Yeah.
Yep.
Will do.
Luckily, get some updates on what Hunter Heritage is up to.
Yeah. And also
it's a work in progress.
Your personal hunting journey, too. We always like to kind of follow progress as weeks go on. Yeah.
Love to share a photo of you with your first mature buck.
Oh, man. Me too.
Yeah. Me too. Next to you, too. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Nice. That was a winner.